Hey everyone, in this demo I'm going to show you how to sew darts, and in this case open-ended darts. Alright, so a couple things to note about darts. They're made up of a few parts. You have your dart tips, the two outer lines are the dart legs, you have the center line here, which is the dart, the center fold line of the dart, and then you have the dart opening or dart intake. Okay. When you're preparing to sew darts, you want to make sure you mark the dart tips. So in this case, I put 2 pins through, and here's the wrong side, and I just marked with my pen exactly where those 2 pins came out, and that's my dart tip. I can take those out. And then you also want to make sure you notch your dart legs and your center fold line of your dart. Okay, very important information for being able to sew it. So, which I've already notched, okay. So this is we're gonna sew our darts in. This is the right side with the lines, and then here's the wrong side, okay. And again, you can see I've marked my dart tip there, and then also I have my 3 notches at the top, which indicate my dart legs and center fold line of my dart, okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the sewing machine and talk about sewing these a little bit more. Alright, so when sewing a dart, what we want to do, it's like when we sew most things, we put right sides together, okay? In this case, we'll be putting the right sides of our dart legs, so these 2 outside notches, we'll bring those together, okay? Bring right sides together. That center notch should be right in the center, and then we want to find our dart tip, which is down here, okay? We want to make sure that dart tip is right on the crease, okay? That's where our center fold line notch is right on the crease. So we want the dart tip to be right on the crease as well, okay? And that's what we'll end up sewing down from this notch here right to our dart tip, okay? Now, typically you can go ahead and just sew that, but if you want to make it a little easier for yourself, you can actually mark the dart leg on there that you'll be sewing. All right. Again, we'll be sewing, there's 2 dart legs here. We have one here and one here, but we only need to sew the one that we'll see when we're sewing it. So when this is folded, okay, we'll be sewing down in this direction. This is our dart seam allowance, okay? So this is the only leg that we'll be seeing when we sew, the only dart leg. So that's the one we're going to mark on there. So I'm simply just going to take my ruler, line up the notch for the dart leg with the dart tip, and I'll just draw a line going from there to there, okay? And that's where the dart tip is. And I'll do the same thing on this dart as well. I'll just mark the dart leg right down to the dart tip, which is right there, okay? And if you want to do this on fashion fabric, you can just mark this with chalk or something. All right. So again, to sew this dart correctly, we're going to bring those 2 outside notches, which indicate dart legs, together, bringing right sides of the fabric together. Okay. If we've done that correctly, then the center fold line notch should be right on the crease, and then we want to find our dart tip and make sure that's right on the crease. If it's not on the crease, just roll it up so it's there. Just make sure it's there. Okay. And if it makes it a little easier, you can put some pins in this, just perpendicular to your dart. I'll just put 2 in here so you can see what it would be like. Okay, and now we can go ahead and stitch this. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. One thing to note, you always, whenever stitching a dart, you want to start from the opening of the dart, or the widest point, and go down to the tip. This will give you a more accurate stitch. Alright. Okay, so here we are. We're going to sew this. Let's go ahead. We're going to back tack at the top, and then just continue stitching right down, following that line that we drew. That's the dart leg. We want to make sure we're sewing nice and straight so we come right off where that dart tip is, okay? We don't want to angle down or curve off or anything, because that can give us a little dimple at the end of our dart, and typically you don't want any kind of dimple at the end of the dart. One other thing I'm going to do here is when I'm about a ½ inch away from the dart tip, I'm going to stop sewing for a second. I'm going to turn my stitch length down, so I'm going to make it smaller, okay? What this does is I don't want to back tack at my tip. I just want a very small stitch that's not going to come out. All right, so if I turn my stitch length down, those stitches aren't going to unravel. Okay, when we back tack, we're stitching over our thread multiple times, and that can create a little bit of bulk, which can also cause a dimple at the end of the dart tip. So I've turned my stitch length down, and now I'm going to stitch, and I'll stitch right off where that dart tip is and keep stitching. And there we go. And I'll cut, and you can see that those threads have kind of been wound together, and that kind of ties it off. And I have very small stitches here, okay, and those aren't coming out. It's almost like I did back tack without doing it. All right, so let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other dart. Make sure you put your stitch length back to your normal construction stitch. And again, we're going to take our dart, we're going to find those two outside notches, which indicate dart legs, and we're going to bring them together, bring your right sides of the fabric together. Make sure that center notch is right on the crease. Find your dart tip and make sure that's right on the crease as well. Okay, and now we can go ahead and sew this. I'm going to back tack at the top, locking my stitches in place. And then stitch. And then about a ½ inch, ½ inch away from my dart tip, I'm going to shrink my stitches down and just stitch right off through the tip. There we go. Okay, turn my threads. And there's my two darts. That's the wrong side of them. It's the seam allowance of the darts. And then here is the right side. All right, let's go to the iron and press these. Okay, so we're going to press our darts now. What I like to do is do it on a sleeve board typically. And right on the narrow edge here of the sleeve board, I like to place the dart tip so it's right on the edge. Okay, and that gives me a much nicer, easier press, and it gives me a nice, clean, crisp dart tip as well. The other thing we want to do and remember is darts, the seam allowance of the darts always get pressed towards the center. Okay, so this would be the center here. Here's the seam allowance of my darts. We're going to press them in towards the center. Okay, so if they're in the front of the garment, they get pressed towards center front, and if they're in the back of the garment, they get pressed towards center back. All right. So let's go ahead and press these. I'm going to put the tip of my dart right on this edge of this sleeve board right here, like so. And I'm going to make sure that the fabric on both sides of that dart seam are being pulled in separate directions, so I get a nice clean press there. And I'm going to press that dart seam allowance towards the center. There we go. Flip it over, and sometimes I'll just give the tip a little bit more of a press. Okay, and then let's do the other dart as well, right on the edge. And there are the two darts. So this is the right side of it. See it's on the dart tip, don't have any dimples or anything. And I'll flip it over to the wrong side, and you can see the seam allowance is pressed towards center. It looks nice and clean. And that is how you sew open-ended darts. All right, I hope this is helpful. Good luck, everyone.